Ladies and gentlemen, what is going on, and welcome to the second video of today out of 3. In today's second video of the day, we are going to be talking SEC predictions. We are going to be giving every SEC team's record prediction in 2024. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the college football season is officially almost here. It is 2 days away now. We are so freaking close to college football being back, but we still have record predictions to predict, and that's what we are going to do in this second video of the day. As I already said, let's go ahead, hop in to this SEC predictions video. Starting off with that other team in the state, obviously I got the Auburn jersey on, but that other team is the Alabama Crimson Tide. For starters, you play WKU at home. We've already been through how we do this. Let's go ahead and start. You start off with WKU at home. Then you take on USF. Then you go to Wisconsin. That is going to be a win right there. Versus Georgia, I think you lose that game. At Vandy versus South Carolina, at Tennessee are all wins. Versus LSU, that is a loss. Versus Mercer, at Oklahoma, and then versus Auburn with wins, with a final record of 9-2 on the year. Not a bad start for this Alabama Crimson Tide team. Moving on is the Arkansas Razorbacks. First, you play Arkansas Pine Bluff. That's a win right there. At Oklahoma State, that is a loss. Versus UAB, that is a win. At Auburn, that is a loss right there. At A&M versus Tennessee versus LSU, all losses. At Mississippi State with the win. Versus Ole Miss versus Texas are both losses. Versus Louisiana Tech with the win. And then you close out the year at Missouri for a final record of 4-8. Moving on, the Auburn Tigers, one of the biggest question marks in the SEC. A lot of newcomers this year, but a lot of guys who can make an impact on this roster. Cam Coleman, Malcolm Simmons, Perry Thompson, Bryce Kane, just to name a few. Then you still got Asante to worry about on the defensive side of things. You still have Asante. You got Lador Faustin over there on the cornerback spot as well. Then you got the offensive lineman, who can be a little bit of an issue, and you have Peyton Thorne returning for his senior season as well. Well, for starters, you get 3 straight wins versus Alabama, A&M, Cal, and New Mexico, all at home as well. Versus Arkansas with the win. Then you are versus Oklahoma. This game right here is going to be a pivotal game for us in the schedule. I think you win that game, and then you are 5-0 going into Athens, Georgia, to set up a potential college game day location for week number 6 in the college football season. At Georgia, you do lose that game though. At Missouri, that is a loss as well. At Kentucky with the win versus Vandy and versus A&M are all wins right there. And then you close out the year at Alabama with a loss, with the final record of 9-3 on the year. So overall, again, not a terrible start to the Hugh Freeze second year. I think this year is going to be a big jump from last season, and you guys will see that coming this season as well. Moving on to Florida. What are they going to look like in 2024 with the toughest schedule this year? Well, let's talk about it. For starters, you play Miami at home. You lose that game. Versus Sanford, you get a win there. Versus A&M, you lose that game. At Mississippi State, you win. Versus UCF, you win. At Tennessee, you take the L there. Then you are at home against Kentucky. I think that is a win right there. At Georgia with the loss. At Texas versus LSU. At Ole Miss. And then versus FSU as well are all losses, with a final record of 4-7 on the year for the Florida Gators. Now, moving on is Georgia. What are the Georgia Bulldogs? The Georgia Bulldogs, what are they going to look like in 2024? Well, versus Clemson, versus Tennessee Tech, at Kentucky, at Alabama, and then versus Auburn and are all dubs. Versus Mississippi State is a win as well. At Texas, you lose that game, I think. Versus Florida, at Ole Miss, versus Tennessee, at home against UMass, and then versus Georgia Tech are all wins there to close out the year, with a final record of 11-1 on this year. Moving on is Kentucky. What are the Wildcats going to look like in 2024? Well, for starters, you get 2 straight wins to start off the year versus Southern Miss and versus South Carolina at home. Versus Georgia, versus Ohio, that's going to be a win. Georgia's going to be a loss. At Ole Miss is going to be a loss against Vanderbilt at home. That should be a win. At Florida versus Auburn, at Tennessee are all losses there. Versus Murray State, at Texas is going to be a loss. And then versus Louisville is going to be a win for a final record of 6-6. A very up and down kind of ride for Kentucky fans this season. But that is their record with 6-6. Moving on is LSU. What are the Tigers going to be in this 2024 campaign? Well, for starters, USC, Nicholls State, South Alabama versus UCLA, or versus at South Carolina versus UCLA, and then versus South Alabama are at home. That is going to be a win right there. At Ole Miss with the win, or versus Ole Miss with the win. At Arkansas with the win. At A&M with the win versus Alabama. I think they sneak past this game, and we'll talk about that game when it comes due time and predictions videos. But you win that game there. At Florida with the win versus Vanderbilt with the win versus Oklahoma with the win for a final record of 12-0, on that one. I think they're going to be really, really good this year, and you guys will all see that in 2024. Well, moving on is an uncertain one at that. That is the Ole Miss Rebels. What are they going to be in 2024? Well, for starters, Furman, Middle Tennessee, Wake Forest, Georgia Southern, Kentucky, South Carolina are all wins. Then you go on the road at LSU, that's a loss. And then versus Oklahoma, at Arkansas are both wins. Georgia, that's a loss. Florida, Mississippi State to close out the year with wins with a final record of 10-2 on the year. Mississippi State, what are their crosstown rivals going to be in 2024? Well, the EKU is going to be a win. At Arizona State, that's a loss. At versus Toledo, that is a win. Florida, Texas, Georgia, Arkansas are all losses as well. UMass is a win. At Tennessee, that is going to be a loss. Versus Ole Miss, and then at Missouri are all going to be losses as well. It's with a final record of 3-8 on the year. I think they will be dead last in the SEC. Moving on is Missouri. A lot of uncertainties regarding Missouri, not on the offensive side of the ball, because I think the offensive side of the ball is going to do just fine with Luther Burden and obviously their quarterback as well. But the defensive side of the ball is kind of where things start to get uncertain for them. You lose a lot of your talent to the NFL and Chris Abrams drained. You also lose a couple of cornerbacks in that slot as well to the NFL. But what are they going to look like this year? Well, let's go ahead and talk about it. Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, Vanderbilt, and Texas A&M and UMass are all wins. Then you go host Auburn, that's a win. Versus you host Bama, that's a loss. Oklahoma, that's a loss. So 2 back-to-back losses there. South Carolina State and Arkansas are all wins with a final record of 10-2 on the year. Not too shabby for this Ole Miss squad, if you do say so for yourself. Now, moving on is a newcomer here. We got to welcome these newcomers to the SEC strongly in Oklahoma. And, well, this year's an uncertainty for them as well, so let's go and talk about it. Temple, Houston, Tulane, all wins. Tennessee, Auburn, Texas are all losses right there, so 3 losses in a row there. South Carolina, that's a win. Ole Miss, that's a loss. Maine, that's going to be a win. Missouri, Alabama, and LSU, all losses with a final record of 5-7 for this Oklahoma team. Now, moving on is South Carolina. What are the South Carolina Gamecocks going to be here in this 2024 campaign? Well, Old Dominion is going to be a win. Kentucky's going to be a loss. LSU's going to be a loss. Akron's going to be a win. Ole Miss, Alabama, Oklahoma, A&M are all losses there. Vanderbilt, that's going to be a win. Missouri, that's a loss. Wofford's going to be a win. And then Clemson is going to be a loss for a final record of 4-8 for the South Carolina Gamecocks. Now, moving on, it is Nico time in Knoxville, baby. Where is Nico Iamaleava going to be with this Tennessee group right here? Well, I think they're going to be really good, so let's go ahead and talk about it. Chattanooga, NC State, Kent State, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Florida are all wins, so 6-0 to start out that year. Alabama, that is a loss at home right there. Kentucky, Mississippi State are both going to be wins. Georgia, that's going to be a loss. Texas, El Paso, never heard of them. That's a win. And then Vanderbilt to close out the year with a final record of 10-2. A really solid start for Nico Iamaleava and this Tennessee Volunteers team. Now, moving on is Texas, another newcomer to the SEC, but I think they're going to be just fine here. Let's talk about it. Colorado State, Michigan, UTSA, ULM, Mississippi State, Oklahoma are all wins. Before you play Georgia at home, I think that's going to be a loss for them. At Vanderbilt, that's going to be a win versus Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Texas A&M, all to close out the year. That is a win right there with a final record of 12-1. A pretty damn good start for this Texas team in the SEC right there. And then last but certainly almost not least is Texas A&M. I say almost because we got one more in the Vanderbilt Commodores. But what are they going to be? A lot of uncertainties for Texas A&M right now, especially on the defensive side of the ball and that College Station unit. So what are they going to look like in 2024? Well, Notre Dame, McNeese, Florida, Bowling Green, and Arkansas are all wins. Then you play host to Missouri, who I think is going to be a loss right there. Mississippi State's going to be a win. LSU is going to be a loss. South Carolina, New Mexico State, those are going to be wins right there. Ugh, I hate New Mexico State. At Auburn, and then versus Texas to close out the year with back-to-back losses for a final record of 8-4 there on the year. Not a bad year for Texas A&M at all. Now, moving on is our final team here in the SEC and Vanderbilt, the Commodores. What are they going to look like in 2024? Well, Virginia Tech, Alcorn State, Georgia State are all going to be wins right there. Missouri, Alabama, Kentucky are all going to be losses. Then you play host to Ball State at home with a win. Texas, Auburn, South Carolina, LSU, and Tennessee to close out the year, all with 5 straight losses. I'm sorry, Vanderbilt fans, but I just think that is where they are going to end up with a final record of 4-8 on the year. And what brings us to our SEC championship game. What is the SEC championship game going to look like? Well, it is the LSU Tigers, 12-0, facing off against the 11-1 Georgia Bulldogs. And I think that the LSU Tigers are going to be SEC champions at 13-0 come time in December. Of course, that is where I'm going to cut second video of today. Let me know what you thought of my predictions in the comments down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn that bell on. We do our best to post on this channel every single day. With that being said, I'm going to hop off, get this edited, so you all can watch it on time. Make sure to have a great rest of your day. And as always, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.